Welcome to another episode of Veterans of the Cedar Valley. My name is Tom Haggerty. I'll be your host for this episode. Over the past few shows, we've tried to bring you veterans and issues for veterans, and we've had veterans on the show from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and other guests that would pertain to veterans issues. Today is no different. We have in the studio today my two guests, Mark Ripplinger, who is the Director of Municipal Operations and Programs for the City of Cedar Falls, and to his right is a community volunteer that everybody knows, Sid Morris, otherwise known as a good guy. Welcome to the studio, gentlemen, and glad you could come. Today's show is updated show on the Veterans Park on Waterloo Road, and which the culmination which was recently a rededication of that park. And right now we'd like to show our viewers a short video on the Veterans Park and the history of it, and after watching it, please come back and we'll interview our guest.
The Veterans Memorial Park had their second dedication ceremony after an expansion project completed. Veterans Park formed back in the 1990s to commemorate the many war veterans in the Cedar Valley area. Today, that park stands as a beautiful reminder of those who served their time protecting our freedom. The project of building Veterans Memorial Park is broken down into three phases. Phase 1 was completed in the 1990s. When Waterloo Road was reconstructed, there was an extra parcel of land available to the city. The city decided to start a memorial for the local veterans in that area. The focal point of Phase 1 is a 50-foot flagpole placed in a circular area paved with stained concrete and engraved bricks. At the base of the flagpole are 5 jet black granite tablets mounted in a pentagon-shaped foundation. Each tablet is etched with the seal and name of a branch of the armed forces. Radiating out of the central plaza are 5 walkways, one for each of the 5 services. Beginning at the foot of the granite base, each walkway is made of engraved bricks bearing the names of veterans. Each brick has the name of the veteran as well as his or her branch of service and service dates engraved on them. Brick sales have helped fund the Veterans Memorial Park over the years. The final piece of Phase 1 is the Cedar Falls Statue of Liberty, which was part of a project from the Boy Scouts, Wassee-Pinnakin Council, and Cedar Falls District back in 1950. It was originally placed in Overman Park, but due to vandalism and the fact it blocked the view of the band shell, it was moved to its current home at Veterans Memorial Park. Veteran Sid Morris has been part of this project since its infancy, so when he found a need to add on to the park, he voiced his opinion.
But when veterans and families came, they didn't have a place to conduct their get-togethers and their activities and so on. So I went to Mark Ripplinger, and he is the on the Parks and Rec Commission in Cedar Falls, and asked him if we could use this. It was vacant land, and asked him if we could build a shelter, a place for we could all meet and get together and have family functions.
Ripplinger said it wasn't in the budget, but Morris was not deterred and offered to raise the money for it within the community. They brought it to the council, where it was later approved. 2 years later, they rededicated the park. The expansion project contained Phase 2 of the Veterans Park. In this aerial view, you can see the expansion extends one of the brick paths across East 14th Court to a large lawn circle area surrounded by a ring of trees, memorial stone benches, and a gravel path. A covered outdoor picnic shelter completes the circle. The shelter is filled with tables and memorial plaques. Council members didn't want the payment of this project to end up falling on taxpayers' shoulders. Individuals, groups, and organizations not only donated money, but also their time and services once construction began. Phase 3 of Veterans Memorial Park expansion project was the installation of a Freedom Rock. Freedom Rock was paid for by the American Legion and donations. At the rededication, area veterans, their families, and supporters came out to the park for the ceremony. Notable guests included Taylor Morris and Senator Grassley. During the program, those involved in the project reflected on all they had accomplished.
Well, for me, I was on the original group, and to me, it feels very good. because I've wanted this to look nice, and it's something that the Cedar Falls can be proud of, and that motivates me because I was a Korean War vet, and I have a very strong feeling about remembering veterans and respecting them.
Though Phase 2 and 3 are completed, there is still a little bit of work left.
We probably consider our park about 90% complete. Really, all we have left to do is a little bit of signage. We might want to look at increasing the landscaping a little bit. So we just have some fine-tuning to do.
Such fine-tuning includes signs telling the story behind Veterans Memorial Park and thanking everyone that participated. Reporting for Cedar Falls City News, I'm Shelby Gappa.
Welcome back to the Veterans of the Cedar Valley show. I'd like to thank Denny Bowman and his staff for putting that short video together about the history of the Veterans Park. Today in the studio we have Mark Ripplinger and Sid Morris, who were instrumental in creating not only the Veterans Park Phase 1, but they were around and added Phase 2 and Phase 3. Sid, I'd like to ask you on Phase 1, the Statue of Liberty used to be at Overman Park. Is that correct?
That's right.
And then could you tell us from that point how it ended up over in Phase 1 of Veterans Park?
In Overman Park, there were a couple issues, and I think Mark can also add to this because he was a part of that. There was some vandalism. Also, we had it obstructed the view of the band shell, and people complained about that, as I remember. And Mark, you then went to the council with the recommendation, as I remember.
To implement Phase 1 on Waterloo Road. And then Mark, following what Sid said as far as the movement from Overman Park over to Waterloo Road, where did Phase 2 and Phase 3 appear from?
Well, that's a good question, Tom. Obviously, Phase 1 was implemented in late 1990s. After 1990s, after the park started, basically it was a lot of maintenance, people adding bricks. At this point, I believe we have almost 2,000 bricks in that particular facility. But around the park, there were still businesses. And there was really nowhere to expand Phase 2 and Phase 3. It was only after the 2008 flood that required the removal of one commercial property, and it created a vacant lot. For a number of years, the Park Division at that time just mowed the lot. As we kept continuing with Phase 1, we realized that there was really no gathering place for the military or for special events and those sorts of things. So Sid came into my office. We talked a little bit about trying to implement a Phase 2, which would be complementary to Phase 1, but also allow an area for reflection or for bigger gatherings than you could accomplish at Phase 1.
And then, Sid, back to Phase 1 a little bit. The contents of the park surround Statue of Liberty, and then there's another five-sided statue.
Yes.
But from that five-sided statue, there's an important element there that helps to maintain the Veterans Park maintenance and upkeep, and that is the brick sales. Could you touch on that?
Yeah, yes, I remember that very distinctly. Ed Stekovic was the mayor at the time, and I was on city council, and he asked me if I would help with the fundraising, and so that's how I got involved originally. And what we wanted to do is to create a place for folks to donate money to veterans issues in Veterans Park and maintain this park. And so we went to the Civic Foundation in Cedar Falls, and asked them if they could be, if they would maintain the funds that are donated to the park. And they are a 501c3 organization. It also earmarked that money for the park. And that was a good move. And then, of course, when we went into phase 2 and 3, then we went back to the foundation and asked them if they would continue that. I think Mark went with us and on that, and they said yes. And so that has been, I think, one of the very important success things that has created the success that we've wanted for the park.
And I want to emphasize that the sale of the bricks helps maintain all 3 phases of
Right.
Veterans Park now.
Right.
And you've done a good job in promoting those and all that. And we'll come back to how to get a brick here in a little while.
Right.
Mark, I want to jump from phase 2, which we'll come back to phase 3, which just all of a sudden there's a rock in phase 3. And I think, again, the man to your right had something to do with finding this rock, and then all of a sudden this became phase 3. Can you tell us a little bit of that?
Well, that story's a little interesting. I'll try to be pretty brief, but of course, there was an artist by the name of Bubba Sorensen who has a goal to place a Freedom Rock in all 99 Iowa counties. Sid, being a veteran, was very aware of that initiative and talked to Bubba and was able to convince Bubba that the one for Blackhawk County would be placed here in Cedar Falls Veterans Park. It wasn't a slam dunk. Obviously, there were some concerns, not with the rock itself, but placing it. Where was the appropriate location? It wasn't designed to be in phase 1. It wasn't necessarily designed to be in phase 2. So we struggled a little bit about where it would be. It only was after a couple individuals from the community, Jim and Santha Kearns, who are artists, drove past the site and said, "Why are you trying to put it in phase 1 or phase 2? There's a perfect location over there on the corner of Bluff and 14th Street." So that started the process of working through the approval with the Park and Rec Commission and the City Council. And ultimately, there was a little apprehension, but the City Council did authorize proceeding, and the facility and the rock that you see today is a result, again, of a lot of hard work from Sid, from the American Legion, and from veterans organizations.
And I thank you. And I'd be remiss not to thank the council and the mayor for sticking with us and watching our progress in all 3 phases, and then finally the approval of the rock. The rock was very interesting from the time they moved it out at the farm field or the field to down at phase 3, and then like the artist painting it. Sid, I want to pick on you a little bit. On the phase 2 portion of the park, tell me a little bit about how the picnic shelter came to fruition, and then the circular benches, I'll call them.
Well, I think maybe Mark can help with this too. We did have an architect in the community that stepped forward and helped us in the very beginning on designing that particular look and design. And Mark was heavily involved with that, and you probably have some additional comments that you'd like to make on that. But it was an idea from an architect in our community.
And still on phase 2, Sid, at that time you were asked to basically raise funds
Yes.
to support the installation of items in phase 2 and phase 3, and since phase 1 is part 2. How successful was that in your mind?
Oh, it was very successful. In fact, I'll never forget the day I talked to Mark in his office about, he says, "Well, Sid, it's not in the budget." I'll never forget that, and that was true, you know, and so we discussed the possibility of raising the funds.
Well, Mark, I've sat in meetings with Sid out to your office on this plan, and one of the things I've always been told about Sid, since he's such a community volunteer and willing to take on a project, is that when Sid approaches you, run the other way. But Sid is very good at what he does in fundraising for groups. And what was the estimate of how much the park was going to end up costing with all 3 phases?
If we were to have bid it out in the private sector, taking into account the cost of the shelter, the site work and those sorts of things, and again, this was just phase 2, not the Freedom Rock, we estimated roughly $100,000. That was if, again, if we would have put a bid package together and had the private sector take care of it.
And part of that 100,000, of course, and Sid will be the first one to thank the city operations for their contributions of time and labor as the construction took place. And it was a slow process. You got the time in when you could, and we do appreciate it as far as representatives from the veterans groups, what the city did to help us keep that under budget. But I was so impressed with the fact that Sid went out, and this was truly a community-supported fundraiser, not taxpayer supported. Is that correct,
Yes.
Sid?
Yes, and you're right. The thing, there's several, I have several comments regarding that whole process. You know, for 60 years, I've been somewhat involved with the city in some way or another, and Mark's staff, you know, I have to talk about this and inject this in. Mark's staff in this whole process have been absolutely the most positive group of people, you know, maybe when I'm not around, you know, but they have been so positive and supportive, and they're open to ideas, their suggestions, and I can't say enough good things about Mark and his staff, because it wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for their positive attitude toward this project.
And as a commander of the American Legion, I'll endorse that subject. I've enjoyed working with Mark on this particular project and with you. Mark, how many city parks are there in the city of Cedar Falls?
Right now we have 35 parks.
And which one was this one? After it's all done,
I guess I would just say it's still Veterans Park. It's just mostly an expansion. We didn't label it Park Phase 1, Park Phase 2, or Park Phase 3. So it's just an expansion of Veterans Park.
but there's 35 parks within the city limits of Cedar Falls.
Yes.
That's amazing planning. And I think, just to sidetrack a little, developers sometimes are asked to provide a park, a green space within the housing development that they put up, and I think you work with those developers and the planning and zoning to accomplish that. But it's impressive that we have that many parks, 35 of them in the city of Cedar Falls. Sid, now let's go back to those benches around. Now, they're not only around Phase 2 in a circular manner, but both of you in the planning put them around the rock too. But tell me what the benches are made of, and what you did to sell them.
Well, Mark and I kind of got into some disagreement on that bench project. I thought he said 27, but he said no, I said 16. So we sold 27.
Okay. Well, but you took them anyway.
Would that be kind of fair, Mark?
Yeah.
I gave Sid 27 pamphlets and said sell 15 or so, and I learned a lesson. If you give him 27 pamphlets, he's going to sell 27 books.
And who did you sell them to?
You know, I contacted people, but most of them, I talked to different service clubs, and I had, and the people talk, they came to me afterwards and said, you know, I want to buy a bench. And In fact, I just sold one yesterday, but I haven't told Mark yet.
Where do the granite benches, I'm calling them granite, but maybe there's something else, where did they come from?
They're actually limestone benches. We got those just here, almost locally. Weber Stone down in Stone City. They're basically fractured. They don't do a lot of sawing on them, so they're a little bit rough, but we believe that they fit in the decor of Veterans Park very well.
Oh, they're excellent places. Just once we can walk on the new sod down there, you could sit on one of them benches and reflect. And around the Freedom Rock, I think there are 5 benches. And again, the Parks Department and all the volunteers did an excellent job bringing that rock sitting in the middle of Phase 3 to be somewhat of a solitary area to go visit. And again, the benches are there. Sid, are you going to engrave those benches, or is the park board? Sid?
Well, yeah, Mark is working on that right now, Tom. And I think we talked about it the other day. He has a designer that is working toward the signage, right, Mark?
Correct.
And then they'll either put a plaque on the bench, or, you know, I'm not too sure how sturdy granite is, but when you go to engrave it or not, but I look forward to seeing those. And those would be all, Mark, people who helped sponsor and purchased a bench. And once that's done, are we going to call that completed on the park?
We still got some signage to do, Tom. The thing we'll take care of first is making sure we get the donor plaques on the limestone blocks. But we are still working with a historian to put together some storyboards, not only for Phase 2, we also want to have a storyboard for the Freedom Rock, and then also ultimately a storyboard for Phase 1. It'll be very similar to the Prairie Pathway signs you see on our rec trail system.
Sure.
It's taken a little bit of time. We want to make sure we have the right verbiage, the right information for our story, and the right pictures. So we'll be working on that probably over the winter, and that signage probably won't be in until in 2017.
Well, I want to go back one more time because I think it's important about supporting the maintenance of the park. Sid, tell me the cost of a brick, and how does our viewers go about? You have to be a veteran from Cedar Falls, alive, dead, what?
No, yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, because we're in the process right now of starting our fall sales on bricks. $50. It costs $50, and that money is used for inscribing the brick, and whatever's left stays in the foundation and is used to maintain the park. So the brick sales are a very important part of this, maintaining the park. And we're going to start a campaign. We've already started, actually. It was in the paper last week, and I'm already getting calls.
Now the sale of the bricks keeps money from city budget having to be spent. Is that a fair statement, Mark?
That's correct. There's usually a little balance, and obviously we have flags to replace. It's pretty windy. Some irrigation issues once in a while. We utilize some of the money in the last couple of years to replenish the planting. So while I can't say it's 100% funded through the brick sales, it is very close to being able to pay for any of the capital improvements or replacements that we need to complete.
Does Sid come down and help plant petunias and flowers and all that?
Sid, he's a good supervisor. He's very good at finding people to help us plant petunias and flowers and stuff like that. So it's a great partnership.
I'd like to add to that too. When we kicked off Phase 2, it was amazing the number of contractors and business people who said, I want to be a part of this project. I didn't contact them first, they contacted me. Yeah. I was amazed at that, because that tells you something about Cedar Falls.
And on the back of the program at the rededication ceremony were listed a number of businesses that either you contacted or Mark knew, or they stepped
Or
forward.
they came forward.
Yeah, and helped raise and construct the park, and the 100,000 plus that was spent. And those people have the thanks of all the veterans and their families in the city of Cedar Falls for helping this park. And again, Sid, we're nearing the end of this program, but touch a little bit quickly, Mark, on what we've done to protect the park. We had a nasty case of vandalism on Memorial Day, which was quickly taken care of by the park's personnel. But what's been added now to give all of us the right to sleep at night knowing it'll be a safe park?
Well, that's a good question, Tom. Obviously, for whatever reason, someone chose to spray paint the Freedom Rock and some property around it. We have a security light that has now been energized, but probably the biggest asset we have is members of the Cedar Falls utilities have paid for a security camera. And the security camera beams directly to through the internet, and it is monitored whenever we have issues, and hopefully that'll create some security that we did not have there before.
And I believe it was the Cedar Falls Union AFSCME members that came forward and purchased that camera, and then again cooperation with CFU and the police department. So hopefully, you know, that was a once in a lifetime issue that, you know, people will respect the park area and what it stands for, and you know, hopefully there won't be any more vandalism. Sid, real quick, I'd like to thank you personally. I haven't had a chance to sit here and make you kind of be quiet while we throw accolades at you, but I've learned over the years that when you take on a project, you take it on, and you help people get involved in it. And this has been a great partnership between the city of Cedar Falls, the Parks Department, Mark's Department, and your volunteerism. And I want you to know that not only do I, but the citizens and veterans of Cedar Falls really appreciate it. And Mark, also thanks to your staff, and again, the mayor and city council. And the history of this park has just been amazing. And I'd like to thank all of our viewers for having stayed with us and watched this park show be completed. We've been wanting to do an update of the Veterans Park Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3. And thanks to these gentlemen and a lot of other volunteers, it has finally come to fruition and completed. And it's been a great addition to the city of Cedar Falls park systems. We hope that you will go visit the park and appreciate the work that's been done. Thank you very much for joining us, and see you on our next show.